Welcome back. Today's explainer is tackling something I think literally all of us struggle with: navigating those really high stakes, super emotional conversations. You know the ones? We're going to go ahead and skip the basic communication 101 stuff and jump right into the actual mechanics of high stakes dialogue. The goal here, to give you a rock solid, structured roadmap so you can get through these moments without blowing up your relationships. I want you to think back for a second to a recent confrontation that just went entirely off the rails. It happens so fast, right? Good intentions just kind of devolve into raised voices or maybe a complete and total shutdown within minutes. Why does that happen? Why do perfectly capable people suddenly just lose all their communication skills under pressure? Well, consider this explainer your emergency playbook. We're going to break down exactly why those conversations fail and, way more importantly, how to make absolutely sure they never fail again. Okay, let's dive into this. Before we fix anything, we've got to look at the anatomy of a confrontation. What's actually happening in the room and in our heads when a chat turns into a battlefield? A crucial conversation isn't just your everyday, run-of-the-mill disagreement. It's very specifically defined as a confrontation where two distinct things happen at once. The stakes are high and emotions run strong. And honestly, it is so validating to just realize how stressful these moments are meant to feel. Your brain literally interprets this social conversation as a physical survival threat. When a huge project at work is at risk or a personal relationship is on the line, and you inject strong emotions like anger or fear into the mix, standard communication just flies right out the window. And when that standard communication breaks down, we fall into a couple of specific traps. The feeling of safety just completely evaporates. And when that safety breaks down, human beings inevitably fall into one of two extremely dangerous failure states. We don't just naturally stay calm and rational when the stakes are high. We panic, and that panic pushes us into either verbal violence or defensive silence. When a crucial conversation gets way too hot, people either go on the attack or they retreat. Verbal violence isn't just yelling, by the way. It's dominating the conversation, forcing your point across, basically trying to win at all costs. On the total opposite end of the spectrum is defensive silence. This is when someone just withdraws entirely, masks their real feelings, or completely shuts down just to avoid the conflict. Both of these extremes are absolutely toxic. If you are in violence or silence, you aren't communicating anymore. Period. So, how do we stop the pendulum from just wildly swinging between violence and silence? We take a step back. Before you even open your mouth to start a high-stakes dialogue, there is some really critical prep work you have to do. You have to start by unbundling the core issue. You're basically stripping away all those really strong emotions to find what is actually at the absolute center of the confrontation. Which brings us to what the source material calls the dialogue path. Think of this as your flowchart for safety. Step 1, as we just established, is unbundling the problem. Ask yourself, what is the actual core issue here? Once you've unbundled it, the path moves you through a really specific sequence. You share facts, which is the least controversial place to start. Then you tell your story, which is essentially your conclusion. And finally, you ask and encourage, which acts as your built-in safety check. You literally cannot skip these steps if you want to keep the conversation out of those violence and silence traps. But to actually walk that dialogue path effectively in real life, you need a specific, memorable framework. You need a magic weapon you can pull out in the heat of the moment when every emotion you have is screaming at you to fight or run away. That is exactly where the state protocol comes in. This is your playbook. It's designed specifically to handle these crucial conversations safely and keep you squarely on that dialogue path from start to finish. Let's move to the full state acronym and see how this builds. It stands for: share your facts, tell your story, ask for others' paths, talk tentatively, and encourage testing. The first 3 dictate what to do, and those last 2 dictate how to do it. Let's break this down systematically. Starting with the S, share your facts. This is absolutely your least controversial starting point. Think about it. When emotions are running hot, opinions are incredibly volatile. But facts? Facts are objective. They're just observable events. If you kick off a crucial conversation by laying out the objective facts of what happened, you are instantly creating a safe, completely neutral foundation. You aren't pointing fingers or accusing. You're just putting a shared reality on the table before anyone even has a chance to get defensive. Okay, so once the facts are on the table, you move to the T, tell your story. Now, in this context, telling your story means clearly stating the personal conclusion you have drawn from those facts. You're essentially connecting the dots for the other person. You're saying, hey, based on these objective facts we just looked at, the story I'm telling myself is, or my conclusion is, Doing it this way owns the perspective as completely your own, rather than stating it like some absolute universal truth. It keeps the dialogue so much more open and safe. Next up, we reach the A. Ask for others' paths. You've shared your facts, you've shared your conclusion. Now? You have to invite the other person into the dialogue. You really want to hear their facts and their story. This right here is how you completely bypass that trap of defensive silence. By actively asking for their perspective, you're proving to them that this is a genuinely safe space for them to speak. It's not a lecture where they just have to sit there and take it. So the crucial point here is that how we deliver all this information is just as important as what we say. That brings us to our second T, talk tentatively. This is all about your tone. When the stakes are super high, it is so incredibly easy to sound rigid. And what does that do? It immediately triggers verbal violence from the other person. Talking tentatively means intentionally choosing words that show you are open to being wrong. You are sharing an observation. You are not handing down a verdict. Keeping that tentative tone maintains all the safety you've just built and completely prevents things from escalating. And finally, we wrap up the acronym with E, encourage testing. Think of this as your ultimate safety check on the dialogue path. You want to actively encourage the other person to test your story and even challenge your conclusion. You are actually inviting opposing views here, because when you make it truly safe for someone to disagree with you, you ensure that you're reaching a real shared resolution rather than just forcing some fake agreement out of them just to end the conversation. Let's bring this all together. Mastering this whole process doesn't mean you need a personality transplant. It really just requires structure. Recognize when you're in a high-stakes moment, avoid those nasty traps of violence and silence, and unbundle the core issue. Then, just deploy that state protocol. Share the facts safely, invite that perspective, and keep a tentative, encouraging tone throughout. Do that, and you literally transform that feeling of absolute dread into quiet, unshakable confidence. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative question. What high-stakes conversation will you fix today? You now have the exact blueprint to unbundle the problem and navigate the emotions safely. Please, don't let defensive silence or verbal violence destroy your next important interaction. Take the state protocol, use it, and just watch it completely change the dynamic of your relationships. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time.